I have to begin by saying hello, shalom. This is truly one of the great honors of my, not just my literary life, but my life, to be included in your family in many ways, to have spoken to a beloved young girl, a young woman named Camilla. And it's an honor that I accept with all of my heart. When I wrote this book, I truly believe I felt as if I was channeled by voices that needed to speak. And so I opened up as much as I could just to listen to them. And it was the animals who came to me, who wanted to speak. And it was as much as it was a strange and interesting experience for you to read the book, for me to write the book, it was the same thing. I had never written a book in such a way that came to me in such a way. It was at once an easy thing to capture the voices, but it was also one of the most difficult things to try to interpret in some ways that I had to do. Much like you interpreted the book, I had to interpret what these animals watching this boy and leading this boy and keeping comfort for this boy and showing him a way home again, and worrying for him, just like a parent worries for their child. I don't know if I'll ever be able to put into words the experience of first receiving the letter from your family and telling me the story of your beloved child, and it was something it took me a long time to absorb and to process and to realize the weight of. I knew the weight of it immediately, but I didn't know if I could carry that weight until finally I realized. I think you might have seen my little boy Deze running around here. It was having he and his younger brother Tiba that made me realize the weight of carrying of a parent and the weight that the child carries for that parent, and my ability now to open up to your family and in some ways be a part of your family, and you are a part of my family now. That's how seriously I feel this connection is between us. And it took me a while to grasp that and be able to speak to that and to accept that. But it's one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever had as a writer and as a person. And so I want to thank all of you for being a part of this and for doing this beautiful work that you've done, that I think does cross cultures and crosses generations and families, and shows us all as we are part of the one great mother. We're all children of the same being in so many ways. And this is just a beautiful way of you showing that and creating that. So thank you.
Thank you. Going back to Wenjack, you've been an advocate for the First Nation cause for years, very passionately so. You've written 3 other books about the people of Canadian First Nation. Why Wenjack? What called you in that book, and why this form?
He was a little boy I knew about for a long, long time. He was written about shortly after his death, his tragic and untimely death at a very young age, trying to get home from this place he had been taken to. And so I knew this story. A lot of other Canadians didn't. And I had this very amazing friend named Gord Downey, who's a singer, a Canadian singer, who he and I talked about creating something together, creating our own projects, and then introducing them to Canada together on the anniversary of the passing of this young boy, Chani Wenjack. And I thought that was a brilliant idea. So he created a music album with a not a comic book, but a animated, yes, exactly. And I worked on what I call a novella, and we released it on that week of the anniversary of his passing. It was the 50th anniversary. First, we had contacted the Wenjack family, though, to ask their permission, to ask them if it would be something that was okay for us to do. And they wholeheartedly agreed and asked us to do it. And since then, we've become dear friends. I think Chani is just one representative of a part of Canadian history that was huge, though. He's a symbol of the thousands and thousands of children who were taken away, and the many thousands of children who died in these institutions. We wrote this not to blame Canada, the government, or to blame the church, or to point fingers. We created this project to bring awareness to the rest of our country about a part of our history that we don't really had talked about at that point very much. And so that's, the reason, in a very, contemporary way why I did it. But, I didn't choose the animals in the story so much as they found me. I was left trying to figure out, how am I going to tell the story of this little boy? And then the animals started to show up, and they were watching him and recording him. And I thought, well, this is great. Let's just see where they will take me on this journey. And they took me on the journey as much as I took them on the journey. They led me. I never knew which animal was going to show up next. It kind of presented itself. And they passed the baton almost from one animal to the other as they walk, following this little boy, trying to protect him and worrying about him and commenting on him, this kind of Greek chorus of animal voices. And so, I talked about how they channeled me, and that kind of experience is a very rare one, I think, for a writer. And I was very, very lucky and blessed to have been afforded this opportunity to do it this way, to create that little book. It's a little book, but I know that it has a lot of power in it. And it's not power from me. I was simply the telephone, in a way, to the Zoom to bring this message out, and that it found its way to your family, to Camilla, to your family, to Israel now, speaks to the power of that book. And again, it's not my power. I was just lucky enough to be the megaphone, the transcriber for that power of the Indigenous world that I touched on in that book. So,
can you say something about the female spirit as you intended it?
I think a big part of that is I'm one of 11 children. I have 7 older sisters, as well as my mother. So I was raised by 8 very strong women. And any young man who has been raised in such a way will know that that's a powerful thing. And it's both a blessing and a curse to be raised by so many women. And so I believe that female voice, all of my writing, there's always a strong woman. And I don't mean to put that woman in there or those women in there. I think that because of my upbringing, something would be remiss, something would be missing if that female voice wasn't there to balance things, to guide things, to judge things, to condone, to help. And that female voice, that female energy in my writing, and I believe in the world, is so incredibly necessary. Where would we be without it? That, when we are lacking female voice in our world, things go wrong quickly. When you cut the female voice from your family or your culture or your environment, you are damning yourself to a lot of pain and a lot of violence, I believe. And so the female voice is absolutely, and the female strength is absolute in its necessity to balance the male. When it came to this specific book, I didn't know that Mother Lynx was going to show up at the end to take him until he got there. I didn't know that the spider would be. I knew there would be a little girl that he met on the way, because that was what happened in his actual real life, running into meeting this small girl. But the others, the female voice, found a way to balance things and to ultimately to nourish and to, she wraps her arms around him in her warmth and allows him to go to the next place, to leave the painful place. And that, if that's a woman in a nutshell for me, I don't know what it is, that kind of introduction to the world, and that if you're lucky enough, that exit from this physical place. And so again, it was other things that channeled into me when it came to writing of Wenjack and the characters. But they made themselves known, I think, very strongly. And so I'm very glad that you see the feminine and you recognize the feminine power in that book. It's something that I haven't spoken to, but obviously I know was just there so strongly.
Yeah, very strongly. Is there anything that you would like to say before we conclude this portion?
Again, I can't express strongly enough how incredible this experience is, and to be able to be a part of your celebration of this young woman who was clearly, from everything I've heard and the beautiful photos of this just powerful young woman, I'm just so honored to be one link in that chain of what I see as a celebration of this life, and the celebration of youth, and the celebration of that journey moving forward, of us finding a way to move forward, and of their voice continuing forward. So again, thank you so much for including me in this.
Thank you, and you've definitely been a very significant part of our story and of our connection, and Camille's timelessness through the connection to your timeless work. So thank you so much. And on a personal note, thank you from my heart for connecting to our story, and for allowing me to translate it to Hebrew. It has forever changed my life. So thank you.
הספר לא מאשים או לפני כתב אישום כלפי ממשלת קנדה, ולא כלפי, למה בעצם לא כלפי הכנסייה?
That's a very strong and important, powerful question. I think there is a place and a time and a structure for questioning and placing blame, but also, if you're going to place blame, what is the follow through? What is the answer? How do you move forward? This particular little book, I wanted just to allow Chani and to allow the animals to live those last hours without the anger, and without the necessarily the why did somebody do this to me. In Canada, we had something called the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. I'm an honorary witness for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, so I was asked to speak whenever I'm given the chance to try to shine light on this history. Again, not to say it's your fault. I think we all know it is the fault of the church and the government, but it's now time for, how do we reconcile? Now that we know the truth, how do we reconcile that? And so the book was a place to allow Chani just to live and breathe. The 9-year-old's not going to, he might be angry, he might place blame a little bit, but he's in the moment. And I wanted to keep that in the moment, while at the very same time, the place to be angry, the place to share stories, the place to begin to get answers, the place to try to seek justice is in this world, beyond Chani's world, a part of Chani's world, but beyond it. And I think, the here and now, and how Canada moves forward as a country is something that everyone has to take a part of. Very recently, hundreds and hundreds of unmarked graves have been discovered in our country at a couple of different residential school sites. We're talking hundreds, into the thousands. And Canadians were caught off guard by this. There was deep sorrow about this. It seems that news cycle passed very quickly, though, and I'm hoping that it hasn't just passed as a bit of news that people hear about and then move on, because it's too difficult to try to imagine. When we imagine that your child is also my child, things change. People will close their ears when they are blamed, and when anger is pointed at them for something they often feel they had no part in or aren't responsible for. And the average Canadian now doesn't feel that he or she necessarily is responsible for these schools that only, as you mentioned, closed their doors in 1996. My wife, Laura, her mother is a residential school survivor. So my 2 and my 3-year-old sons, their grandmother went to this school that she can't ever talk about. But my children have to know about that. And part of that is the history cannot ever be allowed to repeat. And that racist kind of attitude that put Indigenous people in that place can't continue. And so there is anger and there is blame and there is justified righteousness in Canada. But for the average Canadian to understand that this is a burden that you must help everyone carry, and there is a way to move forward. I don't think that anger and shouting will do the trick, will do justice to moving forward. It's an incredible question you ask, because I wrestle with this all the time, the anger, and how often it is geared and aimed at the wrong people often. And so again, just I guess in short, I wanted Chani to be alive in his 9-year-old being, in that sense of wonderment, even in the most difficult of times, that sense of fear, that sense of survival. And when it's that kind of situation, there's little room. Anger burns hot, but it burns very quickly. And that's not what's going to keep him moving forward through the night towards the light that was so beautifully spoken about earlier. If we're going to all move towards that light together, certainly anger is a propellant, is a fuel, but there has to be a stronger fuel, and that is acknowledgement and finding a way of reconciliation.
Would you have written it differently, you think, if it were today, given who you are, where the world's at? And what's timeless about it for us, 10,000 kilometers away and 60 years after? And the second question, actually, I'll just leave it at that.
That's again a beautiful and a personal question that I could speak for hours addressing. The idea of who tells story and who is allowed to tell story as part of this. Would I have told it differently today? I fear that certain things have happened to me over the last 5 years, shortly after this book was released, actually, that my voice, it went quiet. And so I don't think I could have written that book today, again, because of anger. And I think often righteous anger, but anger pointed at the wrong target, would have silenced me, unfortunately. I'm glad that this book, I look back at this book and I too feel it's timeless. And I think the exact time when I wrote it, it was at the height of my career. It was at the height of my friend Gord's career. He's a very famous singer for a band called the Tragically Hip, which is a huge, they're a cultural phenomenon in Canada. And then he died shortly after, and so many things died after he and I took part in that, including him physically. But that book needed to come out then. It needed to come out, I think, as it came out. I hope, despite such anger that has been flying around in the last 5 years in this country, and often directed at the wrong targets, that this book will survive that anger and continue to speak to people. I love that it has a new life now in Israel, that it will be, that Camilla is part of it now, that her voice is there with Chinese now. And that's what gives me the most amazing and kind of beautiful realization that I don't want my voice to be silenced forever. I need to speak again in whatever way I will speak. And I'm going to for my own children. I'm going to continue to speak for Camille. I'm going to write again. I have been writing and I will share it again. And so where there's death, there's always a rebirth. And in so many ways, this has been a rebirth for me. Your family came to me at a time when I was in a very dark and difficult place. And your family, I don't know if you realize it, but you helped pull me out of that place with the realization that my words, that my story, that a story of a little boy can speak to others still without that anger, with great sorrow, but without the anger, something beyond and stronger than fear is what has happened here. And so that's why this is one of the kind of great moments. I don't say that lightly when I say this is one of the most amazing moments of my writing career, and something I think a writer can only hope to have happen, that somebody so far away, 10,000 miles away, will respond and will see themselves and their loved ones in the words that came to me, that I put down on paper, and that you all then in such painstaking fashion and careful fashion translated and transposed to your world. So it's something really special and powerful has happened here, and has happened to me that I was never able to express to your family. This kind of rebirth you have given me is extraordinary, and so I'm so happy that this book will remain timeless, just as Camille will remain timeless, as Chani will remain timeless. It will, I hope, continue to speak to people.
תודה רבה. אני מרגישה שזה משהו שאין צורך בעוד מילים אחריו. זה דבר מאוד חזק, ויש פה עכשיו ככה איזו אנרגיה מאוד 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 גבוהה, של איזו שותפות כזאת בין כל מי שיושב כאן לבין המילים שעכשיו אמרת. המצלמה פה, נכון? אוקיי. אני מאוד מודה לך על זה, זה באמת דבר חזק שאני רוצה שימשיך להדהד כאן בחדר, ומכאן עד לקנדה, ולכן אני אסיים כאן את הערב, ואני אגיד לך תודה רבה שכתבת את הספר הזה, שהשמעת את הקול של צ'אני. תודה לקמיל שהביאה אותו אלינו בדרכה המיוחדת. תודה לסופרת והמשוררת איריס אליה כהן. תודה לדוקטור צילה זלבר צור. תודה לרבית ליכטנברג וקוטיאל על התרגום. ותודה לדורון ולמילי. תודה לאחים של תמיד. תודה על הערב הזה, ותודה לכם שבאתם. תודה לכם.
And thank you, Anna, for translating so wonderfully.
We'll speak soon. Did you hear what I said, Joseph? I said we'll speak soon. And have a great, great, great time with your kids now. And we'll speak soon.
Bless you.
And thank you for sharing your family with us and sharing your heart with us. God bless you. Thank you.